You wake up at 2:12 a.m. to complete silence. No wind, no waves, just the thick, suffocating stillness of a lighthouse in the middle of the ocean. And then, 3 slow knocks from inside the wall. What if the light that's meant to save ships starts acting on its own? What if isolation doesn't just break the mind, but opens a door to something else entirely? Would you trust your senses, or the story the shadows are trying to tell? Lighthouses stand tall, alone against the sea, their lights slicing through fog like a knife. But tonight, we aren't looking at them as symbols of hope. We're listening to the voices, the creaking stairs, the cold air that brushes your back when no one's there. This is more than haunted. These are true stories of real people who went into the lighthouse and came back changed. Are you ready to step inside? There's something haunting about a lighthouse. Not the way horror movies usually portray them, thunderstorms, ghosts, screams, but the quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. The kind that creeps into your thoughts and turns them against you. Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of the sea, wind brushing your face. The only land under your feet is a jagged rock no bigger than a parking lot. There's no road back, no Wi-Fi, no familiar sound, just the distant crash of waves, and the rhythmic pulse of light rotating above your head, over and over and over. Lighthouses were built to save lives, but for the people who've stayed in them alone, they've often done the opposite. It's not the darkness that gets you first. It's the silence. The way it stretches. The way your own footsteps echo like someone else is following you. Psychologists have a name for this: sensory deprivation plus spatial isolation. It can make you hallucinate. Not just see things, but feel them. Cold air brushing your skin when there's no draft. The scent of salt turning bitter, like mildew. And voices. Faint, muffled, almost like they're inside the wall. In one documented case, a lightkeeper in 1903 on a Scottish island was found sitting on the floor, whispering back to something no one else could hear. He survived, but he was never the same. Even today, modern Coast Guard workers talk about that shift, the mental click, that happens after a few nights alone out there. It's subtle at first, misplacing tools, forgetting what time it is. But then it grows. The tower starts to breathe with you. You hear creaks that sound too intentional to be wind. You find objects moved, or worse, added. This psychological fragility isn't just a theory. It's the foundation for what happens in the story you're about to hear. 2 men, 1 remote lighthouse, and a series of events that can't quite be explained, unless the isolation didn't just break their minds, but invited something else in. Let me tell you about Nate, and what happened out on Madness Rock. Nate isn't the kind of guy you expect to believe in ghosts. He's a Coast Guard technician, logical, precise, more comfortable with engine oil and storm forecasts than ghost stories. And yet, in the summer of 2017, something happened that he still refuses to talk about in detail, except to close family. It began with a routine assignment, a 2-man rotation to service the lighthouse at Madness Rock, a barren, sea-bitten isle off the coast of Maine. Just Nate, another tech named Russell, and the cold Atlantic wind. The first nights were normal. Quiet, monotonous, the kind of quiet you get used to after years on the job. But on the 4th night, everything shifted. At 2:12 a.m., Nate wakes up, not to a sound, but to a feeling. The air is heavier, like something is wrong in the bones of the building. When he looks out the window, the sweeping beam of the beacon is gone. The light, a constant, even in sleep, is just off. They climb to the top, flashlights in hand. What they find is a soaked, rotting piece of cloth jammed into the gears, something that looks like an old coat, covered in moss and sea stench. But the door had been locked, the windows sealed. There's no logical way for anything to get in. And then, it happens again. Same time, same mechanism, but this time it's a red scarf. Soaked, torn at the edges, clinging with tiny sea creatures like it had just come out of the water. That's when the fear starts to feel real. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that gnaws at you quietly. Every night after that, things get worse. Russell, once calm and collected, begins talking in his sleep, whispering to the corner of the room like someone is standing there. He stops eating, stops smiling. He sits at the window for hours, claiming he sees someone down on the rocks below, waiting. By the 7th night, both men are blocking doors, sleeping with knives under their pillows. One night, The beacon room is wide open, the massive industrial bulb removed and placed upright in the center of the floor. That's not just sabotage, that's intentional. And then Nate feels it. A cold touch on his back. Russell, pale and shaking, points at the wall, whispering, "It came out of there." What was it? A ghost? A hallucination? Or was it the isolation itself, the crushing silence, that twisted their minds into believing the impossible? There's a term in psychology, folie à deux, a shared delusion between two people in extreme conditions. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe the lighthouse was simply too much. But here's the thing that sticks. The sat phone distress call. At 2:12 a.m., same time the light failed, someone sent a garbled message saying, "There's someone here with us." But Nate swears, he didn't touch the phone until dawn. To this day, he still works in the field. But he'll never return to Madness Rock. And Russell? He quit the Coast Guard. Never told a soul what really happened. Was it a ghost? Or guilt? Or maybe some places are just meant to stay dark. But the story doesn't end here. Because not all horror comes from things we can't explain. Sometimes, it walks beside you in plain sight, smiling, offering you a drink. Let me tell you about Gregory, and the night he met something far worse than a ghost. A stranger, in the dark, with a question. Ghosts are terrifying, sure. But at least ghosts don't knock on your door. With intent. Gregory and Sophia were just looking for adventure. They'd been together for almost 3 years. The kind of couple who'd rather explore a forgotten ruin than spend a weekend at a fancy resort. So when they found an online forum talking about an abandoned lighthouse near Montauk, New York, half buried in fog, only accessible at low tide, it felt like fate. They packed light, 2 flashlights, a bottle of wine, and a camera for documenting their urban exploration. What they didn't know was that someone was already there. The Montauk Lighthouse hadn't operated in decades. It was crumbling, rusted through in places, but somehow still standing like a stubborn memory of the past. They climbed up just before sunset, giggling at creaky stairs and bat colonies overhead. It wasn't scary, it was exciting. Until the sun went down. That's when they heard it. Footsteps, not theirs, coming from below. Not hurried, not loud, just paced, measured. Sophia thought it might be another explorer. But Gregory knew better. They hadn't seen another soul all day. Then came the knocking. Not on the door, but from the inside of the walls. It sounded like someone was tapping metal from within the structure itself. A pattern, almost like Morse code. They hid in the beacon room, flashlights off. For 20 minutes, they held their breath, trying not to make a sound. Then a voice drifted up the stairwell. Low, male, calm. "You shouldn't be here after dark." That's all it said. They never saw the man. When they ran, barefoot, terrified, back to the beach, they found something waiting near their car. A small bundle wrapped in fishing line. Inside, a photograph, a printed still from Gregory's own Instagram page, taken just 2 hours before. From behind them, someone had been watching, following, maybe for longer than they knew. This wasn't a ghost. This was something far more real, and far more dangerous. You see, when we think about horror, we imagine the supernatural. But some of the darkest stories begin with curiosity, and end with someone who was already waiting. And it's not just them. Across the US, dozens of hikers and explorers vanish every year in so-called abandoned places, factories, woods, caves, and yes, lighthouses. Authorities blame accidents, slips, falls, but in more than a few cases, there are signs of something else. Footprints that don't match, ropes tied in deliberate patterns, or cameras found with the last photo being someone approaching from the shadows. Gregory and Sophia got lucky. They made it out, but it changed them. They don't explore anymore, and they never, ever, go anywhere without phone tracking. Because sometimes, it's not ghosts you should be afraid of. It's the people who want to be found in the dark. And yet, there's another kind of horror. Not from ghosts, not from strangers, but from the way the human mind can turn against itself. Especially when you're alone, especially when the fog never lifts. Let me tell you about Ian. And the night the lighthouse broke him. Lan was a quiet man. The kind you'd meet once. And instantly trust. Kind eyes. Steady voice. The kind of calm that comes from years spent working in unpredictable places, hurricanes, floods, power failures. Nothing rattled him. Until the lighthouse. It was supposed to be a solo assignment, 2 weeks on Crane Point, a lighthouse off the coast of northern Oregon, still used for emergency signaling. Nothing fancy, just keep the generator running, log reports, monitor weather. Ian had done it before. But this time, something changed. He arrived in early November. Rainy season. The first few days were uneventful. He made daily check-ins, cooked simple meals, read old paperback novels left by the last keeper. But by day 5, the fog rolled in, and it never left. Gray days melted into darker nights. The kind of darkness where even your own hands feel distant. His messages became shorter, then irregular, and then they stopped. When the Coast Guard sent a team to check on him, they found the place locked from the inside. Ian was alive, but barely. He was sitting at the top of the tower, facing the wall. He had scratched symbols into the wood with a metal spoon. Circles, spirals, names no one recognized. And on the mirror in the bathroom, written in sea salt with his own damp fingers, were 5 words. She won't let me leave. He hadn't eaten in 4 days. He kept saying the light was talking to him, that it changed tone depending on where he stood, that when he turned his back, it mimicked his breathing. Doctors called it a dissociative episode, possibly brought on by extreme isolation, lack of sunlight, and sleep deprivation. But Ian said something different. He told his sister, quietly, in a moment of rare clarity, "It wasn't loneliness that broke me, it was knowing I wasn't alone." There were no signs of intruders, no evidence of any other person or presence. And yet, Ian insisted that at night, the air shifted, the tower settled differently, that the lights sometimes turned before he touched the control, that something watched him through the fog. But perhaps the most chilling part? He drew her. In one of his notebooks, buried beneath nonsensical diagrams, was a sketch of a woman, pale, long black hair, standing by the ocean. No eyes, just a mouth, open, wide, screaming silently. Ian recovered, eventually, but he never returned to any coastal assignments. He now works inland, surrounded by people, buildings, cars. He says the silence is what does it. Because once your mind hears something in it, it never forgets. Stories like Ian's aren't rare. In fact, they're more common than we admit. Psychologists are now studying lighthouse keeper syndrome, a blend of cabin fever, sensory disorientation, and hallucination triggered by isolation near large bodies of water. But what if not all of it is in the mind? What if some structures, like certain people, carry a kind of memory? What if places can absorb emotion and reflect it back? Which brings us to the final story. The oldest one. A story passed down not through reports or news articles, but through whispers. A lighthouse so cursed, even the sea avoids it. Let me take you to Harrow's Reach. And the truth that was never supposed to surface. There's something strange about how many ghost stories begin with a lighthouse. And it's not just coincidence. From the rocky shores of Maine to the misty cliffs of California, America's coastlines are dotted with these tall, solitary sentinels, once symbols of safety. Now, they feel more like tombstones. But why do so many of our darkest stories take root there? Maybe it's the design itself. Narrow towers, winding stairs, thick walls that trap sound and amplify your heartbeat. The kind of place where every creak feels intentional, where every shadow could be something more. Or maybe, it's the silence. The deep, ocean-fed silence that settles into your bones when you're alone in a place built to warn others. Lighthouses exist because something dangerous is nearby. That fact alone makes them feel haunted. Take the legend of Harrow's Reach, an abandoned light station in the Outer Banks. Locals say it was swallowed by a freak storm in the 1890s. Along with the 3 keepers inside, their bodies were never recovered. And for decades, fishermen swore they saw a dim, flickering light still shining through the mist on stormy nights. Others talk about Warden's Bluff, where the final keeper carved words into the stone foundation. "I keep the light for no one." His journal, later found waterlogged, describes footsteps pacing upstairs while he was outside, a woman crying in the boiler room, and a final entry that simply says, "She's in the lens." It's easy to dismiss these as tales told around bonfires, passed down to scare the next generation. But they persist. Even now, especially now, in an age of technology, radar, satellites, and digital weather alerts, lighthouses still hold power in our imagination. They are the perfect setting for what we fear most. Isolation, madness, the unknown. They sit at the edge of the world, where the ocean meets sky, where logic begins to blur and the rules don't always apply. And let's be honest, deep down, part of us wants to believe the light is haunted, because it reminds us that not everything can be explained, that some places hold on to stories even when the people are gone. So the next time you pass by an old lighthouse, crumbling, quiet, a little too still, look up. Does the beacon still turn? And if it does, who exactly is it warning now? But maybe the most haunting thing of all isn't the ghosts. It's that we keep returning. To write stories, to explore ruins, to chase the feeling of something just beyond reach. Because horror doesn't always hide. Sometimes, it waits patiently. In the tallest room, behind the thickest glass, watching. Let's be honest, there's something incredibly tempting about abandoned places. The silence, the mystery, the untouched dust. It's like time pauses inside those walls, and you get to walk through the stillness of someone else's forgotten story. But that pull toward mystery? It can be dangerous, sometimes more than we're prepared for. Take Evan, for example. He was a hobby explorer, quiet guy. Always had a camera slung over his shoulder. He'd explored everything from deserted farmhouses to forgotten tunnels. One day, he decided to visit the Crestwood Lighthouse, a decommissioned structure off the coast of Michigan. No access road, no warning signs, just wind, rusted stairs, and a half-broken door that groaned when you touched it. He documented the whole trip, but never uploaded the final footage. When friends found his gear days later, it was just inside the tower's entrance. Camera battery drained. His last shot was a still frame of someone, or something, standing at the top of the stairs. Though Evan had gone in alone, he was found a mile inland, shaken, scratched, and repeating one sentence. There was a room that wasn't supposed to be there. Now, was it a psychological episode? An injury? Or something else? We may never know. But what we can take from stories like Evan's is this: the thrill of discovery should never come at the cost of your safety. So if you're thinking of exploring abandoned spaces, especially places like lighthouses, tunnels, or remote buildings, remember these. Never go alone. Not for bravery, for backup. If something happens, someone needs to be there. Tell someone where you're going. Share coordinates. Set check-in times. Bring more than tech. Flashlights fail. Batteries die. Paper maps. Backup lights. And emergency gear matter. Know the structure. Rusted beams. Rotting floors. And narrow staircases can collapse. Sometimes, the danger isn't paranormal, it's physical. Respect the space. These aren't playgrounds. These are stories. Be gentle with them. And most importantly, listen to your instincts. If the air suddenly shifts, if the silence becomes too loud, if your gut says, leave, then leave. You can always come back. But only if you walk away. Some places are abandoned for a reason. Not because no one loved them, but because something inside refused to let go. And as we've learned from these lighthouse stories, whether ghost, guilt, madness, or memory, some lights aren't meant to guide you home. They're just warnings, glowing in the dark. And now, the waves return to their rhythm. Slow and steady, the lighthouse fades into the mist. No longer looming, just watching. You're safe. You're here. The stories stay behind, where they belong. So breathe, and let the last echo drift away. Not all lights are meant to be followed. What do you think about this topic? Don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to stay updated on our latest videos. We'd love to hear from you. For now, goodbye and see you next time.